My best friend betrayed me for millions. I ended her career in one night. Sarah and I were inseparable since the second grade. We shared everything from lunch boxes to our deepest secrets. By the time we reached our 20s, we were partners in a boutique marketing agency called Lumina. Before we continues, please subscribe and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps this powerful, life-changing story reach the world. I was the creative brain, the one who stayed up until 4 in the morning crafting campaigns, while Sarah was the face. She had a way with words that could convince a fish to buy an umbrella. We promised each other that we would reach the top together. Loyalty over luxury, she used to say, toasting her coffee mug to mine. I believed her with every fiber of my being. I never imagined that the person I called my sister was actually measuring the distance between my shoulders for a knife. We were on the verge of landing a $10 million contract with a global tech giant. It was the deal that would change our lives forever. I spent 3 months developing a revolutionary strategy that no one else in the industry had seen. I showed the entire blueprint to Sarah the night before the big presentation. I trusted her with my genius. I didn't know that while I slept, she was packing her bags and rewriting the story to remove my name entirely. The morning of the presentation, I arrived at the office to find it completely empty. My key card didn't work. I knocked on the glass doors, but no one answered. I tried calling Sarah, but her phone went straight to voicemail. A sinking feeling started in my stomach and spread through my chest. I checked my email and found a termination notice. Due to a restructuring of Lumina, your services are no longer required. IT read. There was no severance, no thank you, and no explanation. I raced to the tech giant's headquarters, hoping to catch the meeting. When I arrived, I saw Sarah through the glass walls of the boardroom. She was standing in front of my slides, presenting my ideas as her own. She looked refined, powerful, and completely unbothered. She didn't even look at me when I was escorted out by security. I realized in that moment that she had sold our friendship for a multi-million-dollar paycheck. She had already signed the contract as the sole owner of the new agency. I was left on the sidewalk with nothing but the clothes on my back and a brain full of stolen ideas. The betrayal was so deep that I couldn't even cry. I just felt cold. For the next 2 years, I disappeared. I changed my name, moved to a different city, and took a job at a small data analytics firm. While Sarah was becoming a celebrity in the marketing world, I was becoming a master of information. I learned how to track every cent, every lie, and every weakness in a corporate structure. Sarah was living the high life, buying mansions and posting videos of her success. She called herself the marketing queen, but I knew the truth. I knew that every win she had was built on the foundation I had created. She was still using my strategies, just repackaged in shiny new boxes. I spent every night studying her movements. I watched her hire people who were just like her, greedy and disloyal. I knew that her ego would be her downfall. I just needed to wait for the right moment to strike. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calculated. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for total destruction. I saved every penny and invested it in shadow companies that would eventually surround her empire. I was the ghost in her machine, the silent observer waiting for the final act. Sarah finally announced the biggest project of her career. A global launch for a luxury smartphone. It was a $50 million deal that would make her the most powerful woman in the industry. The entire world was watching. The launch event was set to take place at a historic theater, with a live stream to millions. This was the opportunity one had been waiting for. I knew the system she was using because I was the one who had originally designed the prototype for her server security years ago. She had never updated the core protocols because she didn't understand how they worked. I spent months writing a script that would take over the entire broadcast at the exact moment she took the stage. I wouldn't just expose her. I would dismantle her entire professional identity in real time. I managed to get a job as a freelance tech coordinator for the event under my new identity. I worked in the shadows, wearing a headset and a black uniform, blending in with the hundreds of other crew members. Sarah walked right past me twice during rehearsals. She didn't even glance at the tech girl, holding a cable. She was too busy looking at her reflection in the monitor. The night of the launch was electric. The theater was packed with celebrities, investors, and reporters. Sarah was backstage, radiating confidence in a $5,000 dress. I was in the control booth, sitting behind the lead engineer. He was busy adjusting the audio levels, unaware that I had already inserted a USB drive into the main hub. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I remembered the cold sidewalk 2 years ago. I remembered the hunger and the shame. I remembered the way she had looked through me like I was invisible. The lights dimmed, and the crowd went silent. The intro video started playing, a glossy, over-the-top tribute to Sarah's genius. She walked out onto the stage, capturing the spotlight. Innovation isn't just about technology, she began, her voice smooth and practiced. It's about vision. It's about the bravery to see what others cannot. I smiled to myself as I watched her from the darkness. She was about to find out that my vision was much clearer than hers. I reached over and hit the execute key on my laptop. The screen in front of me flickered, and the script began to run. There was no going back now. Suddenly, the glossy video on the giant screen behind her cut to black. The audience gasped. Sarah froze, looking over her shoulder with a confused smile. Tech hiccups happen, she joked, trying to keep her cool. But the screen didn't stay black. Instead, a recording from 2 years ago started playing. It was the audio of her talking to her lawyer the night she fired me. If we terminate her now, she has no legal claim to the strategy. Sarah's voice rang out through the high-end speakers. I don't care if she's my best friend. $10 million is more important than lunch dates. The theater went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Sarah's face went from radiant to pale in seconds. She tried to signal the booth to cut the feed, but I had locked the entire system. The lead engineer was frantically typing, but he was locked out. The recording continued, playing a montage of all the documents she had stolen, side by side with the original files I had created. The dates and timestamps were clear for everyone to see. The reporters in the front row started taking pictures. The investors looked at each other in horror. Sarah was standing in the spotlight, but she had never looked more alone. The screen then shifted to a live feed of Sarah's private bank accounts, showing the millions she had transferred to offshore accounts to avoid taxes. I had found the paper trail she thought she had buried. The crowd began to murmur, the sound rising into a wave of anger. Liar! Someone shouted from the balcony. Sarah tried to speak, but her mic was dead. She looked like a deer in headlights. I stepped out of the control booth and walked down the side aisle toward the stage. I removed my headset and headset cap, letting my hair fall down. I walked into the peripheral light of the stage. She saw me. The recognition in her eyes was like a physical blow. She stumbled back, grabbing the podium for support. I didn't say a word. I just stood there and watched her empire crumble. The board of the tech giant, sitting in the front row, stood up and walked out in unison. That was the end. Her career was gone in less than 10 minutes. The live stream had broadcast her disgrace to 5 million people worldwide. She had wanted fame and I gave it to her, but not the kind she could survive. By the time the security guards realized what was happening, I was already heading for the exit. I walked out into the cool night air, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders that I had carried for 2 years. The phones of every reporter in that room were probably blowing up with the story of the century. Sarah would be tied up in legal battles for the next decade. She had stolen my work, but I had reclaimed my life. I didn't feel joy exactly. I just felt settled. The account had been balanced. I drove back to my small apartment, packed my bags, and prepared to move again. This time, I wasn't running away from a betrayal. I was running toward a new beginning. I had enough evidence to reclaim my intellectual property and sue for damages, but I realized I didn't even want her money. I had proven that no matter how many millions you have, you can't buy true talent or loyalty. Sarah was a marketing queen without a kingdom, and I was finally free from her shadow. I looked at the city lights in my rearview mirror and smiled. The creative brain was finally working for herself. The fallout was spectacular. The next morning, Sarah was the top trending topic on every social media platform. The news called it the greatest corporate expose in history. Her office was raided by the authorities investigating the tax evasion charges. Her clients dropped her faster than a hot coal. She issued a statement claiming the video was a deepfake. But no one believed her. The evidence was too thorough, the timelines too perfect. I watched the news from a coffee shop in a new town, sipping a latte and feeling completely invisible. It was the best feeling in the world. I had started a new consulting firm under my real name, and my inbox was already filling up with offers from people who admired the anonymous whistleblower. I knew I would eventually have to step into the light, but for now I enjoyed the silence. Sarah had tried to erase me, but she had only succeeded in making me the most sought-after mind in the business. I had turned her betrayal into my greatest advertisement. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of my own success. The world was finally seeing the real genius behind the scenes. Weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Sarah. It was written on cheap notebook paper, a stark contrast to the luxury stationery she used to favor. "You destroyed me," it read. "I have nothing left. I hope you're happy." I read the words and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, no satisfaction. I realized that she still didn't understand. She had destroyed herself the moment she decided that a paycheck was worth more than a human being. I didn't destroy her. I just held up a mirror. I tossed the letter into the trash and went back to work on my new project. I was building something real this time, with people I trusted. I had learned that loyalty isn't just a word you toast to. It's a practice you vet every single day. My new team knew my story, and we built our culture on transparency and shared success. We were small, but we were mighty. I was finally the boss I always wanted to be. Sarah was a ghost from a past life, a lesson learned the hard way. I was moving forward, and I never looked back. The prodigal partner had become the true master. As my new agency grew, I made sure to hire people who had been overlooked by the big firms. I wanted the rejects, the dreamers, and the ones who had been stolen from. We became known as the Justice Agency. We didn't just do marketing. We did it with integrity. Our clients trusted us because they knew our history. We landed a deal with a nonprofit that helped victims of corporate fraud, and it felt more rewarding than any $10 million contract. I was finally using my creativity to do good. Meanwhile, Sarah's legal troubles only got worse. She was facing jail time for the financial crimes I had uncovered. Every time her name appeared in the news, it was a reminder of the darkness I had left behind. I wasn't glad she was suffering. I was just glad she was no longer in a position to hurt anyone else. Power without principle is a dangerous thing, and she had proven that to the entire world. I was focusing on my own light now. I had a life full of genuine connections and meaningful work. I had turned the worst night of my life into the start of my best years. I remember the day we moved into our new office space. It was bright, open, and full of plants. It was the opposite of the cold glass tower where Sarah and I had once worked. I stood by the window, looking out at the city, and felt a deep sense of pride. We had built this from the ground up, without stealing a single idea. My team was laughing in the background, celebrating our latest win. I realized that this was what success was supposed to feel like. It wasn't about the millions in the bank. It was about the peace in my soul. I had reclaimed my voice, my talent, and my name. Sarah had tried to take everything from me, but she had accidentally given me the freedom to find myself. I was no longer the brain, hidden in the shadows. I was the leader standing in the sun. I had proven that truth always finds a way to the surface. The career I ended wasn't just hers. It was the version of mine that was tied to her lies. I was starting fresh, and the view from the top was better than I ever imagined. But the world is smaller than you think. One afternoon, I was at a business conference when I saw a familiar face. It was one of the junior analysts who had worked for Sarah during her peak. He looked nervous as he approached me. "I just wanted to say thank you," he whispered. We all knew something was wrong, but we were too scared to speak up. "What you did at the launch, it gave a lot of us the courage to leave." I realized then that my action had impacted more than just Sarah and me. It had sent a ripple through the entire industry. It had told every boss that they couldn't treat their people like disposable tools. I felt a new level of responsibility. I started mentoring young creatives, teaching them how to protect their work and their worth. I wanted to ensure that no one else had to disappear for 2 years just to get justice. I was turning my revenge into a legacy of protection. Sarah had wanted to be a queen, but I was becoming a guardian. The story of our betrayal was no longer a scandal. It was a cautionary tale for some and a source of hope for others. One evening, I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset. I thought about the night Sarah and I had promised to reach the top together. We had both reached the top, but in very different ways. She had climbed over the bodies of her friends, while I had built a ladder for others to follow. I realized that the top is a very lonely place if you don't have anyone you trust standing next to you. I had my team, my friends, and my integrity. Sarah had nothing but a reputation in ruins. I felt a strange sense of closure. The chapter of my life that was defined by her betrayal was finally over. I was no longer the girl who was betrayed. I was the woman who thrived. I took a deep breath of the cool air and smiled. The future was wide open, and I was ready for it. I had ended her career, but I had saved my own life. And that was the best revenge I could ever have. I closed my eyes and let the peace wash over me. The prodigal partner had finally found her home. Months later, the final verdict came in for Sarah. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison for tax evasion and fraud. The news was a small blip on my radar, but it felt like the final full stop on a long sentence. I continued to grow my agency, focusing on ethical marketing and transparent business practices. We became the most respected firm in the region. I was often invited to speak at universities about corporate ethics. I told my story honestly without bitterness. I wanted the students to understand that success without integrity is just a hollow shell. I watched their eager faces and hoped they would choose a better path than Sarah did. I was no longer the victim. I was the teacher. I had taken the darkest moment of my life and turned it into a beacon for others. I was happy, truly happy, for the first time in years. I had an empire of my own, built on truth and talent. And no one could ever take that away from me. The story was over, and the master was finally at rest. During the trial, I was called to testify as a witness. It was the first time I had seen Sarah up close since the launch event. She looked small, defeated, and tired. She wasn't wearing a designer dress anymore. She was wearing a plain gray suit. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. I felt a surprising wave of pity for her. Not because I regretted what I did, but because I realized how much she had wasted. She had so much talent, but she had traded it all for short-term greed. As I spoke on the stand, I was calm and clear. I provided the evidence dispassionately. I wasn't there to hurt her. I was there to tell the truth. The judge listened intently as I described the system I had built and the way it had been exploited. After I finished, I walked out of the courthouse without looking back. The justice system would handle the rest. I had done my part. I drove to the park and sat on a bench watching the children play. I felt so light, like I could fly. The weight of the truth was finally off my chest. In the years that followed, my agency expanded nationally. We opened offices in 3 other cities. I made sure that each branch was led by someone who shared our core values. We became a family in the truest sense of the word. We celebrated each other's successes and supported each other during tough times. I never forgot the lessons I learned from Sarah. I always kept an eye out for the signs of ego and greed, both in myself and in others. I remained humble, always remembering the days when I had nothing. I used my wealth to fund scholarships for aspiring creatives from low-income backgrounds. I wanted to give them the chance I almost lost. I was finally the person I was always meant to be. Sarah was just a distant memory, a ghost from a life I no longer recognized. I had proved that you can reach the top without losing your soul. The view from here was magnificent, not because of the height, but because of the clarity. I was at peace with the past and excited for the future. I remember one New Year's Eve, we had a party at the office. The room was filled with the people who had helped me build this dream. We toasted to the future, but also to the past. To the lessons that made you as strong, I said, raising my glass. My team cheered, and we danced until the early hours of the morning. I felt so connected to everyone there. I realized that this was what I had been searching for all along. A place where I belonged, where my talent was valued, and where my heart was safe. Sarah had tried to steal my future, but she had accidentally led me to the one I was supposed to have. I was grateful for the struggle, for the pain, and even for the betrayal. It had all led me here, to this moment of pure joy. I looked at the fireworks exploding over the city and felt a deep sense of gratitude. I was the master of my own destiny, and I was surrounded by love. The story of the betrayed partner had become the story of the triumphant leader. And it was a beautiful story indeed. Occasionally, I would hear updates about Sarah from old acquaintances. She was struggling in prison, finding it hard to adapt to a life without power or luxury. I would listen for a moment and then change the subject. I had no desire to dwell on her misery. My life was too full of good things to waste time on negativity. I was focusing on new projects, new challenges, and new ways to give back. I had started a podcast where I interviewed other entrepreneurs who had overcome adversity. I wanted to share the message that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of a much better one. The podcast became incredibly popular, reaching millions of listeners. I was using my voice to empower others, just as I had empowered myself. I was finally comfortable in the spotlight, knowing that I had earned my place there. I was no longer afraid of being seen. I was proud of who I was and what I had achieved. The prodigal master was in full bloom. When Sarah was finally released from prison, she reached out to me one last time. She sent an email asking to meet, claiming she wanted to apologize. I thought about it for a long time. I realized that I didn't need her apology to be whole. I had already forgiven her, not for her sake but for mine. I didn't want to reopen old wounds or give her the chance to manipulate me again. I deleted the email without responding. Some doors are better left closed. I had moved on, and she needed to do the same. Had built a life that was completely independent of her, and I wanted to keep it that way. I wasn't being cruel. I was being protective of my peace. I had worked too hard to get here to let her back in, even for a moment. I turned off my computer and went for a walk in the garden. The flowers were in bloom, and the birds were singing. It was a perfect day. I was free, truly free, from the shadow of the past. I was living my best life, and that was the only response she needed to see. My agency eventually became a global powerhouse, but we never lost our boutique feel. We still treated every client like they were our only one. We still valued creativity and integrity above all else. I became a frequent guest on major news networks, discussing business trends and ethics. I was recognized as one of the most influential women in marketing. But when I went home at night, I was just me. A woman who loved to draw, who enjoyed a good book, and who treasured her friends. I had achieved the balance I had always dreamed of. I had proved that you can have it all without giving up who you are. I was proud of the legacy I was leaving behind. I had turned a personal tragedy into a public good. I had ended a career built on lies and started a movement built on truth. I was at the top of my game, and the view was spectacular. I was the master of the empire, and I was finally at peace. The story of the prodigal master was a testament to the power of the human spirit. I often think about the girl I was on that cold sidewalk 2 years ago. I want to go back and tell her that everything will be okay. I want to tell her that the pain she is feeling will become her greatest strength. I want to tell her that the friend she lost wasn't really a friend at all. But I know that she had to go through all of it to become the woman I am today. Every struggle was a step on the ladder. Every tear was a drop of fuel. I am grateful for that girl, for her bravery and her resilience. She didn't give up, even when the world felt like it was ending. She kept going one day at a time until she reached the sun. I honor her every day by living my life with purpose and kindness. I am her triumph. I am her redemption. I am the prodigal master, and my story is a song of victory. The neon lights of the city no longer feel cold. They feel like a celebration. I am home and I am finally enough. One day, a young intern at my firm asked me what the most important thing I ever learned was. I looked at her, seeing the same spark of ambition I once had. Never let someone else's betrayal become your story. I told her. They can steal your work, they can steal your credit, but they can never steal your soul unless you let them. Use the pain to build something better. Be the architect of your own redemption. She nodded, her eyes bright with understanding. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I was passing on the wisdom that had saved my life. I was helping the next generation be stronger and wiser. That was the true meaning of success. IT wasn't about the millions. IT was about the impact. I had ended one career, but I had inspired 1,000 more. I was at peace with my journey, the good and the bad. I was ready for the next adventure, whatever it might be. I was the prodigal master, and my legacy was secure. The story was over, and the future was bright. I am sitting in my office now, the same bright, open space that I love so much. The sun is setting, casting a warm glow over the room. I look at the photo of my team on the wall, and feel a surge of gratitude. We have come so far together. I think about the journey from that dark night at the theater to this peaceful moment. It has been an epic saga of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately redemption. I have learned that the best way to end a career built on lies is to start one built on the truth. I have learned that loyalty is the most valuable currency in the world. And I have learned that I am much stronger than I ever imagined. I am at peace with the world. I am ready for the next chapter. I am the prodigal master, and my story is one of hope and triumph. The lights of the city are twinkling below, a reminder of all the possibilities that await. I am finally home and I am enough. The creative brain is finally at rest, knowing her work is done. As the last light of day fades, I close my laptop and prepare to head home. I feel a sense of completion that is deep and lasting. The story of Sarah and me is finally over, not with a bang, but with a quiet sense of justice. I have reclaimed my name and my future. I have built something that will last long after I am gone. I walk out of the office, turning off the lights as I go. The space is quiet, but it feels full of life. I step out into the night air, the same air that once felt so cold, and find it warm and welcoming. I am no longer the abandoned partner. I am the triumphant leader. I am the prodigal master, and my journey is complete. I have turned a betrayal into a blessing, and a loss into a legacy. I am at peace, I am happy, and I am home. The world is wide and full of wonder, and I am ready to explore it all. I am finally enough, and my story is a triumph of the human spirit. The end is just the beginning. She thought she had taken everything from me. But in the end she lost far more than she ever imagined. I didn't just survive. I rose higher than ever before. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe because stories like this are just getting started.